You know, it's been a busy week in the PC gaming world. We got a sneak peek of Dead Space Remake, which is awesome. We got a new legend in Apex. AMD is scaling back production of Ryzen 7000 series, and DLSS is actually unlocked on older RTX cards. Engineering that they said they needed? Maybe not. Well, maybe you should stick around and find out right now, right here on Robeytech. First up, let's talk about this. Based on an internal report from AMD, it looks like production might be being scaled back when it comes to next-gen Ryzen 7000 series CPUs due to market decline. Though it's probably the fact that this requires customers to adopt a completely new platform, and with that comes a lot of cost. I mean, in our video that you can watch right here on the Should You Buy Ryzen, $750 is a steep entry for anybody looking to jump into a new platform. AMD was banking on the benefits of the AM5 platform with supporting both DDR5 and PCIe Gen 5. But it hasn't really done that because the sheer cost of adopting a new platform has users hesitant on taking the plunge, considering that right now there isn't really a whole lot of significant use cases and improvements that come with the addition of PCIe Gen 5 and DDR5 memory, though the 4090 has made DDR5 a little bit more realistic. Sure, for some, it does offer huge improvements like I was talking about, but for the average gamer, it's just not a viable reason to drop the cash on building a system from scratch. So right now, it seems that the Ryzen 9 7900X is looking to be the top seller for the AM5 platform, which makes a certain amount of sense considering new adopters willing to spend that kind of money aren't going to do it on entry-level systems. For the time being, it looks like AMD is going to be focusing less on producing the Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 5, and you can't really blame them given that you can still easily obtain AM4 components, and you really have, that last gen setup. You can easily upgrade your CPU to the Ryzen 5800X 3D or the rest of the Ryzen 5000 series and still see huge improvement for less investment, even with the 4090 or some of the higher end GPUs. That being said, you gotta be honest, it's still fun to build and play with new hardware, but in this economy, transitioning to a new platform just doesn't seem to be feasible for most. Did you guys know the Core i9 13900KF hit 6 GHz? On the other side of the CPU fence, someone has managed to crank an i9 13900KF up to 5.97 GHz all-core, reportedly on an AIO setup, though skeptics say that the temps of 68 degrees Celsius and the voltage required to get there may suggest otherwise. But even so, it's still a remarkable feat to hit the 6 GHz mark, and you know what? They said that that's coming readily and easily next year. I mean, the 13900KF is already a pretty beefy CPU considering it's a single core boost clock up to 5.8 GHz and an all-core boost clock of 5.5. So nearly breaching 6 GHz is a pretty big deal, especially if it's done with an AIO. And if you're watching this, guess what? And this is coming late enough. We're going to be doing that very same thing on launch day, October 20th. So you should check that out either on our live stream channel or in our video that'll be coming out that day on overclocking the 13900K. So let's talk about Nvidia, because you know what? Nvidia's been in the news a lot this week. Some good, sorta, with the unlaunch of the 3080 12 gig. And you know what? Of course, also with the release of their brand new GPU, the 4090. Now that it's in hands of people, obviously a lot of people are talking about it. Now, considering the power of the new GPUs, which Nvidia showcased what's possible in their portable with RTX demo, and then they announced their product lineup in September, there's a lot of people looking for every little scrap of news they can find. And I'll tell you, man, Nvidia just seems to be shoveling it out there right now. But the one that I want to talk about is, thanks to Reddit, we saw a glimpse of an RTX 4050 GPU box at Galaxy's release event in the Philippines. Now, there isn't any information visible on the box aside from the name 4050, since there's a tiny little light right next to it shining off the surface of the box. So curse you, ray tracing and your realistic lighting. But it is kind of nice to know that there is some more budget-friendly options coming in the future. And since there's a lot of new features like DLSS 3.0 that are locked to the 4000 series GPU, I'd love to see what that's gonna do, though I don't have a lot of hope. Or, speaking of DLSS 3.0, that it's locked to the 4000 series GPU, we have been told that, but once again, Reddit comes in clutch with some good news. Using Cyberpunk 2077 as their example, one user was able to add a simple config file to the game that allowed them to remove the VRAM overhead. This allowed them to set up the game to use ray tracing, obviously, but also use DLSS and DLSS frame generation, which is kind of the big selling point of DLSS 3.0. And if you want to know all about that, you should watch my video right here that it kind of explains all of the awesome that is in the new Nvidia ecosystem. Now, not only does it use AI to scale up the new lower resolution images, but to fill in the gaps between frames, it basically gives you higher frame rate. And to be honest, if you want to learn a lot more about that, you should go check out Hardware Unbox, who did a very big deep dive on DLSS 3.0. Now, the trade-off is that it's not always the most stable on something like an RTX 2070, but at 1440p, no HDR, DLSS set to balance, your frame generation on, they were able to hit, 80 frames. That's respectable. Now, bumping the DLSS up to quality dropped their performance to 3540, but that's still amazing considering it's a card that came out when the game was launched and couldn't even really run the game all that well with ray tracing on at the time. I mean, nobody wants to remember that, but that was a rough time. The reason for this working, aside from the super hacks of adding a config file, is that the hardware to use the frame generation feature of DLSS 3.0, which we've talked about, is already on both the 2000 series and 3000 series card. But they're not as powerful. In fact, there's a 2 to 2.5 times more powerful version of that hardware inside a 4000 series. And they did say, Nvidia was very clear, though it doesn't seem as hard as they said it was, that some additional engineering and development was needed to bring it to lower end cards. So for now, yeah, the 4000 series is gonna give you the better experience. I mean, that's kind of a given. But if you wanna be okay with that taste of that sweet DLSS 3.0, if you're still thinking that it's sweet despite the hardware and box stuff, I still feel like there's gonna be a lot of awesome coming out of that. It's depending on the game you wanna play. You might be okay with what you have for now and go get a little more juice out of that old GPU for your games, Now, lastly, let's talk about some news in the actual games themselves, since that's what we're here to play. Riot Games has acquired and absorbed a game studio out of Australia. G'day, mate. Specifically, they work on the big world toolset that used in a ton of military MMOs like World of Tanks, World of Warplanes, World of Warships. I think you get the idea. And if you haven't heard of those games, you've kind of been living under a rock. See, if it's World of anything military and not Warcraft, obviously, it's using this toolkit. Now, Riot named the studio Riot Sydney. How original. And it will be using that studio to support League of Legends, obviously, Valorant, and other Riot tech teams. Apex Legends, by the way, speaking of, I have no idea, there is no segue there, but anyway, Apex Legends revealed a brand new legend today, and it's the game's first trans woman named Catalyst. As per usual, we got an awesome animated short giving us her backstory, and Apex introduced us to the character's voice actor, Melly Grant, who is also trans. It's great to see more inclusion in the gaming industry, especially on the voice acting side. Now, the legend is already getting a lot of love by the community. It means a lot to the trans gamers out there who are excited to see how she actually plays. Now, finally, and the one that I am so excited about, guys, the devs for Dead Space Remake gave us 8 minutes of new gameplay footage showing off the graphical improvements they are making, and it still looks just as pants-messingly scary as when it first came out. And maybe even more so, with some pretty impressive game improvements as well. We saw a few areas from the game. We saw the hangar bay, which is way bigger than it was in the original, and you can fly through the hangar in the remake to explore the Ishimura and see all the details they've added to the world. In the remake, they were able to make things much bigger than they were before, and no longer do you have to use the tram as a loading screen. And they have the entire game as one seamless world you can move around with and navigate, which is pretty cool. Now, when they went through the machine shop, we saw that the game and the enemies and the lighting conditions will change if you backtrack through areas of the game you've actually already been to, which is pretty rad and adds for some pretty cool replayability. Now, the added details and effects make sections of the games, like the decontamination room, way more intense. I mean, way more intense. Like, where are your diapers? Your depends level intense, because you can't even see the necromorphs even when they're sitting like right next to you about to munch on your spleen. And your spleen tastes like sausage, unless you're a vegan, and then it tastes like spinach. Okay, well, that's it for PC gaming news today. Are you gonna try to unlock DLSS 3.0 on your 2000 or 3000 series card? I'd love to know if you do and what your results are. Are you gonna be upgrading to a Ryzen 7000 series CPU? Maybe a 13th gen. That is actually happening this week as well. And we're gonna be doing a live stream, which you should check out. It's gonna be happening on Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Now, would you play a League of Legends Wargame MMO if they made one? now that they have Wargaming Sydney in their ranks? That is a legit question. Now, let me know all of that down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, you might as well subscribe. I mean, come on. You might as well like the video and hit that notification bell so you know when our next video is going to come live, because we've got our 13th gen review coming up very soon. Now, speaking of live, check out our live stream channel over at Robeytech Live or Twitch at Robeytech, and you can check that every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, where we're going to be doing 13th gen builds, 4000 series builds, Ryzen 7000s, all the builds, and even some great budget builds. So you should go and tune in and check out our bigger brother, Robeytech Live, and all of that info is down in the description below. Now, you should also follow Robeytech everywhere on socials: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Trust me, we've got the best memes. And also head on over to our Discord over at discord.gg/Robeytech, where you can hang out and talk with other PC gamers, builder, and enthusiasts, and maybe play some games together. Or, you know what, maybe get some help troubleshooting your build. Regardless, maybe you'll make a friend. And everybody needs friends. But anyway, guys, that's it for me. Have a good one, and we're going to see you on the next one.